Can AI PID tune a quadcopter? I have always said no. I've been really skeptical of that idea. But so many people contact me and say that they just plugged their black box log into ChatGPT and it gave them suggestions that really made their quad fly way, way better. And I figured it was time to investigate. This is video number 2 in the series. In video number 1, AI did a pretty, actually, it hurts me to say this, it did a pretty good job of getting the filters on my quadcopter about where they need to be. In this video, we're going to actually get onto the PID, the PID tuning, which I think AI is going to find much harder to do a good job of. But having been wrong once, maybe I should temper my expectations. If you didn't watch part 1, there's a link in the video description below. Can I suggest you check that out to give you the context going into this one? But in the meantime, we're going to roll right into it. And the place that we're going to start is here in PID Toolbox. This is a piece of software specifically for analyzing PIDs. And the screen that we're looking at right now is called the step response. And here's a very, very basic analogy of what the step response is. Let's say that we're trying to drive a car on a road and the goal is to keep the car on the center line of the road. We could evaluate how good you're driving by how close to the center line you stay. The more you stray from the center line, the worse of a job you're doing as a driver. The idea that here is that a PID controller for a quadcopter, there is a target that it is trying to hit. Now, when we get into what the actual target is, it gets very, very complicated and very technical. The target that it's trying to hit is basically a certain rotational rate. The sticks are commanding a rotational rate of 100 degrees per second, and we're going to try and hit that rate as precisely as possible. And the way that it actually works is that when you move the stick, there's always a delay because things don't accelerate instantaneously. There's a delay after you move the stick, then the quad starts to accelerate, then it hits the rotational rate, and then sometimes it overshoots and backs off and oscillates. And then how long does it take to hit the rotational rate? Does it accelerate slowly? Ideally, what you want is for the quad to be constantly hitting the commanded rotational rate as perfectly as possible. And the function that we use to evaluate that is called the step response. And what we're looking at here is the step response graphs for the roll, the pitch, and the yaw axis. And basically, and again, this isn't a PID tuning tutorial. Frankly, I'm not even qualified to give a tutorial on PID Toolbox. I am a very, very basic user of PID Toolbox at best. But basically what we would want to see is we would want to see these lines exactly tracking this dashed line. When these lines are exactly tracking this dashed line, the quadcopter is doing exactly what it is being commanded to do, and therefore the PID controller is doing its job. And whenever these lines are below the dashed line, it means that the quadcopter was slow to respond and moving too slowly. And whenever these lines are above the dashed line, it means it was moving too quickly. So, for example, if we look at the yaw axis, we can see that the yaw axis takes forever to get up to the commanded rate, and in fact never quite reaches the commanded rate. The yaw axis is always just slightly behind the curve. And in fact, so here we moved the stick and then it's trying to get there. It's not getting there. 200 milliseconds later, it has barely reached the commanded rate. We have a super unresponsive yaw axis, and that, oh, hang on, let me get this thing in the camera. That makes sense when you consider that this is a giant 10-inch quadcopter. These things traditionally have really poor yaw performance. It's just that's how big quadcopters are. So we could try to improve that, but we was only going to get it so good. But the point is not, oh, how do we PID tune this quadcopter? We're going to get to that. The point is that you could kind of look at this graph and understand that what we're seeing is a quadcopter that is super slow to respond on this axis. And if we go look at the roll axis, this is actually pretty close to perfect. I mean, perfect is it could always be better, but we see it respond. And within, let's say, 50 milliseconds, it has hit the targeted rate. It overshoots just a little bit, and then it gets back online and more or less stays tracking pretty well. We could try and sharpen that up. We would want to see it hit the commanded rate further to the left, sooner. The sooner it hits the commanded rate, the more responsive it's going to feel, but we wouldn't want to introduce too much overshoot. And then here on the pitch graph, we can see that there is this ringing response, this oscillation where it's constantly bouncing around the commanded rate, but it never really settles down. That is a definite defect in the PID tune. That is something like excessive P gain, if you know a little bit about PID tuning. That's like just definitively a problem. And again, we can try to see if we can fix that. That's my analysis. Let's see what ChatGPT, actually we're using Gemini for this one because I use Gemini most. Let's see what Gemini says. The two black box files that I uploaded, can you evaluate the PIDs to make specific recommendations for improvement? What I would say based on what I've seen is increase the P on yaw to try to get the yaw axis more responsive, maybe feed forward on yaw, although not all PID controllers put feed forward on yaw. And then on the roll axis, maybe reduce P or increase D, because that's how you deal with ringing. I'm sorry, the pitch axis. The roll axis is kind of good, but I would probably tweak it just to see if I could make it better. That's smart that it's trying to break it down into phases of flight instead of just like looking at the whole thing. Yaw axis analysis will focus on checking for a slow response. What do we got? Come on, you got anything for me? Yaw tracking, set point versus gyro. That is, I mean, it's not showing a step response exactly, but comparing set point to gyro is what you want to do. Pitch noise spectrum. What's going on here? Pitch tracking. This is, I don't know what, this seems bogus. This seems bogus. I think it's gone. I don't know what these graphs are, but it's like, it's just like thrashing. It's still thinking. Is it stopped? Is it still, it's still thinking. That's accurate. The axis rate standard is moderate movement, but okay, some serious rapid changes in direction. That is true. That is true. This quadcopter has a rate of 400 degrees per second, at full stick deflection, but I did rapid changes in direction. It is accurate. I did throttle punches and sharp turns, sharp 180 turns. Yeah, so now I'm asking it for the step response specifically, as opposed to just give me better PIDs. But you would have to know what step response was in order to know to ask for that. Okay, that is a step response graph. Let's see, we have a rise time somewhere around, is that microseconds? 1.6 microseconds. This is milliseconds. The response time can't be in microseconds. The motors take 15 milliseconds roughly to even start to respond to a change in throttle. So that doesn't seem right. Pitch axis. No, again, it's giving times in microseconds. This is garbage. I think you're probably right that it's undertuned. Sluggish and loose because the PID controller is sure during sharp moves. That's not true. That's because I don't want to be going to 100% unless I'm at full throttle. These were not full throttle maneuvers. If I was going to 100% motors at like 20 or 30% throttle, then I would have nothing left. No, that's not right. We definitively do not want that to be true. And in fact, is that accurate? Here's motors. So like here's a full throttle move where the motors go to 98, 96%. Where's my sharp turns? There. There's a sharp turn right there. Right? See, that was a sharp 180 turn, sharpish. And the motors go to 60%. So its statement is accurate. But like you can see, like here, the motors only go to 60% because I didn't go to full throttle. We don't want the motors going to full throttle here. They'll have nothing left when I actually do a full throttle move. This is probably accurate. And this doesn't make sense because the P gain will reduce delay, but raising the I gain doesn't have anything to do with delay. In fact, too high I gain can actually make delay slower. So let's see what it recommends. It's trying to look at the actual values of the terms, and like an I term very low just means that the quad is balanced. It doesn't, or that there aren't external forces. Like, why would you think that I term needs to be higher? We want the I term low as long as the quad is flying well. And then this seems pretty relative. But its recommendation, I don't think its recommendation is wrong. This is INAV, not Betaflight. Increase feed forward by 30 to 50%. I'm not going to increase I gains. I gains, if we saw the I term being high, it would mean that there was a lot of drift error. And raising P could reduce the drift error. Yeah, didn't call out the oscillations on the pitch axis either. I agree that we need to raise P on yaw for sure. I would raise P and feed forward on roll just to see if it gets better. And if it induces oscillations, I would back it off. And I think we need increased D on the pitch axis because it looks like there's oscillation here. Let's do what it says and see what the result is. Except I'm not raising the I. Maybe I should just do what it says. Increase by 25%. Fine, I'm going to do exactly what it says. I'll be a good little guinea pig. Increase feed forward gains on roll and pitch by 30 to 50%. So we'll take that from 60 to 90. Move stick response slide. So that's a Betaflight thing. It has forgotten that I'm using iNav. See, this, if I was a total noob, I'd be like, where's the stick response slider? Increase P and I gains by 20 to 30%. Let's change P from 40 to 60, 30 to 40, 40 to 60, 30 to 40. There's no master multiplier. That's a Betaflight thing. And on yaw, it hasn't talked about the yaw axis, right? No, it's not talking about the yaw axis at all. But I'm going to raise the P gain on the yaw axis and feed forward. Actually, let's raise feed forward on the yaw axis. If you have slow responding motors, feed forward basically helps the PID controller get ahead of the slow response of the motors. And I'm going to raise that from 60 to 90, but I'm not going to raise P. And we're going to see. That's just a gut check thing. I think is a good idea. We're going to fly. Oof. Definitely sagging out this battery. I think that's better. Oh yeah, no, much sharper. There's no bounce back at the end of that move, for sure. Alright, let's bring it in. Oh, yaw axis is horrible. Look how sloppy that is. That's just what you get with a big bird like this. But just like before, let's take a look at PID Toolbox to see what the effect of the changes was, and then we'll see what Gemini says. On the roll axis, I like this a lot. We have a much bigger overshoot, which you might think, well, that's bad, don't we? Well, I think that a quad is going to fly best when there's a little bit of overshoot and then it quickly gets back online. We could probably refine this a little bit by adding D gain to reduce the overshoot. But overall, I like this line better than this line, even though technically this line, you see how much faster it gets to the set point? Then it slightly overshoots and rings a tiny bit, but then it settles down and it's right on the line. I think that's pretty good. A 5-inch quad would do it faster, and there's only so much we can ask from a great big quad like this. I would add a little bit of D here, but overall I'm pretty happy with that. The pitch axis, we have gotten rid of the ringing and oscillation, which is weird because we raised the P gain, which usually makes more oscillation, but we also raised the D gain. I see. Yeah, that explains it. So we raised the P gain and we raised the D gain. Things got better. The number one thing I see here is that this line is still pretty sloppy, and it is got a consistent offset below the line. So a consistent offset. Do you see how it is basically tracking the line, but it's below the line? That's I-term error. Consistent offset is I-term error, and we need to raise the I gain to fix that. The size of the overshoot and the speed of the overshoot seems pretty good. If we really wanted to sharpen it up, we might add a little bit of P gain. The D seems about right, and add a little bit of I. And then on yaw, this is very interesting. We've got this little bit, this bump here, and then it slows down and it tracks. What we've got here is, this is feed forward kicking in, but feed forward only kicks in right at the moment that you move the stick, and then the regular PID controller takes over. And so for this to really work, we would need so much feed forward that it shoots up here and holds. And I don't know if we're going to solve this problem with feed forward. We could try to add P, but again, you just, there's only so fast it's going to move on the yaw axis. I think we may be chasing our tail here and kind of at a dead end. I made some changes per your recommendations. What do you think? $5 million says it thinks, oh, I did a great job, and then tells me some other BS. This step response graph makes no god-dang sense. Like, why is it behind and then ahead? I have no idea. Why are we looking at microseconds? The step response can't be happening in microseconds. The motor hasn't even received the D-shot command in microseconds. I mean, the motor certainly hasn't even begun to change speed in less than, say, 5 to 10 milliseconds. So I don't really know how to interpret this, but good for you if you're thinking hard. Sure, with more feed forward, it's going to be more responsive. It's right that P term should be higher than I term. It's saying a lot of accurate things, but is it making accurate conclusions? It still needs work. The drone is still undertuned on P gains, especially on the pitch axis. That's possible. We do see some overshoot on the pitch axis, and I think if it was truly undertuned on the pitch axis, we wouldn't see this overshoot. We would see something more like the yaw axis, or here, or this red line here, a tiny bit of bounce, but with no rebound. So here we overshoot, we rebound and back. Overshoot and rebound and back. I think that's a good flying quad. Increase pitch P gain significantly. I mean, it makes sense on this quad that the pitch P gain would have to be higher than the roll because the quad's weight is distributed on the pitch axis and narrower on the roll axis. Increase pitch P gain significantly, 30 to 50%. We're going to take that to 80. Increase roll P gain moderately, 20 to 30%. Let's add 15, 60 to 75. Keep feed forward as is, except on the yaw axis, I'm going to put feed forward back the way it was. We can try raising yaw P. The problem is that if the quad can only rotate so fast, and then we try and make the P gain push it faster than it can go, we'll accumulate a lot of error, and then we'll get a lot of I-term accumulation, which will cause rebound, and basically, like, you can only make it go so fast. I think, I don't know, I think we're just going to leave the yaw axis alone and call it a lost cause on a 10-inch. That's what we're going to do. Oh, that's bad. That shuddering is bad. Now we got a full battery. Oh yeah, that's really bad. You see that? That's P gain's way too high. Do it one more time just so you can see it. That's shuddering during prop wash. P gain's way too high. D gain's not high enough. But yeah, even if I just punch the throttle a little bit, yeah, see the shaking? That's bad. That's P gain's way too high and or D gain's too low. We've gone too far. That's an absolute sign we've gone too far. That oscillation that you saw, number one, when coming down from a dive, that's called prop wash oscillation, or number two, you even saw it a little bit just as I was sort of jamming the throttle on a flat punch out. That oscillation is 100% of the time a sign that your PID tune is not right. It means excessive P gain and or insufficient D gain. So P and D are kind of in opposition to each other. You raise P to make the quad more responsive, but then that brings out oscillations, and you raise D and it balances P out, and then you have to sort of find the sweet spot where they're both like balancing each other and also both high. And anyway, that's a topic for another video. But the point is that these PID gains are absolutely definitively worse than the ones before. Now, you could make an argument okay, I raised P and I got a little oscillation, but if I then raise D, I'll have this super locked in awesome quad. And you could be right if we were trying to tune a little 5-inch racing drone. This is not even like a 7-inch racing drone. You might be like, okay, I'm going to try and get the best out of it. This is a big 10-inch drone. It's made for slow cruising. It's made for carrying a cinema camera. It is not made. We want it to be smooth, but we don't want to push it into this realm where we're trying to just push it harder than it can go, and eventually it sprains an ankle or tears a hammy, blows a motor and falls out of the sky. We need this thing to be smooth and locked in as it can be, but we're not going to try and just wring all the performance out of it that we can, because that's not what it's made to do. But here's the thing. Let's see if Gemini can tell that I had oscillations. And we'll just start by being as vague as possible. Here's the result of the changes. What do you think? It's doing the thing where it expects a certain outcome and then it looks for that outcome, and it's kind of self-reinforcing. I've noticed AI tends to do this. And then you're like, hey, you didn't make it better. In fact, you made it worse. And it's like, oh, you're right. I was so sure. This is on the right track. Increased P term excessively, or the D term isn't responding fast enough, leading to significant overshoot. It's like, bro, this is the thing. There are techniques for analyzing this data. PID Toolbox has those techniques, but it doesn't know them, so it has to figure it out, like, from scratch. And it's like trying. Was our oscillation on the roll axis? Let's open up this log and let's just confirm that. Roll and pitch. We're getting oscillation on roll and pitch. Pitch mostly, a little bit on roll, but mostly on pitch. So I wrongly advised the user to increase the gain. Significant roll overshoot. No, our roll axis did have a little bit of overshoot, but I thought it was pretty good. Let's see what you got. All right, what do you got? Roll axis performance is great. Is it? We have massive overshoot and continued oscillation on both roll and pitch. It's not great. I wouldn't call that great. I think we need significantly more D-gain. No, see, it didn't pick out those oscillations at all. Those oscillations are definitive signs of a problem, and it completely missed it. So, yeah, I'm going to roll it back. I mean, I'm tempted to chase it with a little higher D-gain, but the problem is that raising D-gain creates additional noise, additional heat, and also, I don't know if you've noticed, but sometimes it kind of goes a little bit, and that's a sign that you have too much noise, too much electrical noise in the gyro, vibration in the gyro, and raising D-gain makes that worse, not better. So we're going to roll this back a little bit. I might even lower the low-pass filter a little to give it a little more resiliency. What's the takeaway here? I feel like, as someone who knows a thing or two about PID tuning, it definitely gave me some good advice. Like, the advice it gave about filters was just dead on right. And then as soon as we got to the PID tuning, the things it was saying, the things it was looking at, like just the absolute magnitude of the terms, it didn't really seem like it was looking at the same things that I'm used to seeing people, experts like Brian White, the guy who wrote this PID Toolbox program. When I hear them talking about PID tuning, the things they talk about are not in any way remotely like the things that Gemini was talking about. And it didn't come to the same conclusions. It's not like two paths up the same mountain, but we got to the same result. The recommendations it was making, in some cases, they were a little bit right, like raising P-gain did help in some cases, but in other cases, they were just definitively wrong and or completely missed a definitive problem. So can you use AI to PID tune? I think that if you know what you're doing, maybe it will tell you some things you didn't think of, and you'll go, that's a good idea. That's actually where I found AI to be most helpful. It just brain dumps on you, and somewhere in that brain dump, you see a nugget, and you're like, oh yeah, that's a good point. But then you just ignore the rest of it. But when it comes to actually selecting PIDs, evaluating step response, I'm not convinced it was doing a very good job. But what about a tool specifically designed by someone who knows about PID tuning, specifically designed to PID tune, an AI tool trained exactly for that purpose? That's what we're going to be looking at in the next video in this series. And there's a playlist in the video description below and a card on screen, if you can see it, that'll take you to a playlist with all of these videos where that one will show up. And I'll see you there.